The stage lights went down, the crowd screamed, but Amy Winehouse wasn't hearing any of it. Her eyes were locked on one person. In the middle of Back to Black, during the second verse, a young woman in the front row collapsed. Security rushed forward, the band kept playing for a few seconds out of momentum, and then Amy's voice just stopped. She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a sharp thud that echoed through the arena. 15,000 people fell silent. Amy stepped off the stage. Nobody knew what was happening. The band looked at each other, confused. The crowd murmured nervously. But Amy was already pushing through security, moving toward the barrier, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. She wasn't performing anymore. She was just Amy. And she was going to that girl. Subscribe now, because what happens next will change how you see Amy Winehouse forever. 3 hours earlier, that same girl, her name was Sophie, was standing outside the O2 Arena in London, clutching a ticket she'd saved for 8 months to buy. She was 23 years old. She had been sick for 2 years. Leukemia. Stage 3. The doctors had given her a timeline, and it wasn't long. But she had one dream left, to see Amy Winehouse live. Just once. Her older sister, Emma, stood beside her, holding her arm gently. Sophie was weak. She shouldn't have been there. Emma had tried to talk her out of it a dozen times that week. But Sophie had looked at her with those tired, determined eyes and said, "If I don't go now, I'll never go." So Emma drove her to London. She helped her through the crowd. She made sure Sophie had water, a place to sit before the show started, and stayed close the entire time. When the lights finally dimmed and Amy walked onto that stage in her signature beehive hair, black eyeliner, and that raw, unfiltered presence, Sophie started crying. Not from sadness. From relief. She had made it. Amy opened with tears dry on their own. The crowd exploded. Sophie sang every word, even though her voice was barely above a whisper. Emma watched her sister's face light up in a way she hadn't seen in months. For those first 2 songs, Sophie wasn't sick. She was just alive. But halfway through, Back to Black, something shifted. Sophie's grip on the barrier loosened. Her breathing became shallow. Emma noticed immediately. "Sophie? Sophie, are you okay?" Sophie tried to nod, but her knees buckled. Emma caught her just before she hit the ground. Security saw it happen and moved in fast, but by then, Sophie was unconscious. The people around them started shouting, waving for help. And that's when Amy stopped singing. She had seen it from the stage. The commotion. The girl going down. The panic in the crowd. Most performers would have kept going, trusting security to handle it. But Amy wasn't like most performers. She had spent her whole life feeling too much, caring too much, breaking too much. And in that moment she saw herself in that girl. Amy dropped the mic and walked off stage. No announcement. No explanation. Just movement. The band stopped playing. The entire arena went silent. Some people thought it was part of the show. Others knew something was wrong. But no one expected what came next. Amy pushed past security guards who tried to stop her. "Let me through," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. They hesitated. She didn't wait. She shoved past them and climbed over the barrier, her dress catching on the metal, her hands shaking. She knelt down next to Sophie, who was lying on the ground, pale and barely breathing. Emma was holding her sister's head, tears streaming down her face. "Please, someone help her," she was saying over and over. Then she looked up and saw Amy Winehouse crouched beside her. For a second, she didn't believe it. "Is she breathing?" Amy asked, her voice steady but urgent. Emma nodded, unable to speak. Amy reached out and took Sophie's hand. She didn't say anything at first. She just held it. Tight. Like she was trying to pour life back into her through touch alone. Paramedics arrived within seconds, but Amy didn't move. She stayed right there, on the floor, holding this stranger's hand, while 15,000 people watched in stunned silence. One of the paramedics gently touched Amy's shoulder. Miss Winehouse, we need space. Amy looked at him, then back at Sophie. Is she going to be okay? We're doing everything we can. Amy finally let go of Sophie's hand, but she didn't leave. She stood up, wiped her eyes, her signature black eyeliner now smudged, and watched as they lifted Sophie onto a stretcher. Emma was sobbing, trying to follow them. Amy grabbed her arm gently. What's her name? Amy asked. Sophie, Emma said, her voice breaking. Amy nodded. Sophie's strong. I can feel it. Then Amy did something no one expected. She turned to the paramedics and said, I'm coming with you. Miss Winehouse, you don't have to. I'm coming. And she did. Amy Winehouse left her own concert, walked out of the O2 Arena, and got into the back of the ambulance with Sophie and Emma. The crowd didn't know what to do. Some were confused. Some were moved to tears. The band stood on stage, instruments in hand, unsure whether to pack up or wait. Security started making announcements, but the truth was, no one really knew what was happening. All they knew was that Amy had walked off stage in the middle of a song and hadn't come back. Inside the ambulance, Sophie's eyes fluttered open. She was disoriented, weak, but conscious. The first thing she saw was Amy Winehouse sitting across from her, still in her stage outfit, holding her hand. Am I dead? Sophie whispered. Amy smiled, tears in her eyes. No, love. You're very much alive. Sophie started crying. Not from pain. From disbelief. You stopped your show, for me? Amy squeezed her hand. The show doesn't matter. You matter. Emma, sitting beside her sister, couldn't stop shaking. Thank you, she kept saying. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The ambulance rushed through the streets of London, sirens blaring. Amy sat there in silence, still holding Sophie's hand, her thumb gently stroking the back of it. She wasn't thinking about the thousands of people she'd left behind. She wasn't thinking about the backlash she might face. She was only thinking about this girl, this stranger, whose hand felt so small and fragile in hers. Sophie looked up at Amy with glassy eyes. I listened to your songs every day in the hospital, she said quietly. They made me feel less alone. Amy's face crumpled. She had to look away for a moment to compose herself. You were never alone, she finally said. You were always with me. In every lyric. In every note. Emma watched the exchange, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. She had spent 2 years trying to be strong for her sister, trying to hold it together, trying not to fall apart. But in that moment, watching Amy Winehouse, this icon, this legend, sit in the back of an ambulance holding Sophie's hand like she was the most important person in the world, Emma finally let herself cry. Amy stayed with them all the way to the hospital. She didn't leave until the doctors confirmed Sophie was stable. She gave Emma her personal phone number and made her promise to call with updates. And before she left, Amy leaned down and whispered something in Sophie's ear. Something only the two of them would ever know. Backstage, Amy made a decision that would shock everyone around her. When Amy finally returned to the O2 Arena 2 hours later, most of the crowd had left. But about 3,000 people had stayed, sitting quietly in their seats, waiting. When Amy walked back on stage, they erupted. Not with the usual screams and cheers. With something deeper. Respect. Love. Gratitude. Amy picked up the microphone. Her voice was hoarse, her makeup ruined, her dress wrinkled. But she had never looked more beautiful. I'm sorry, she said softly. There was someone who needed help. And I couldn't just keep singing. The crowd roared. Amy smiled, wiped her eyes again and said, Let's finish this, yeah? She sang 3 more songs that night. No production. No elaborate lights. Just her voice, a guitar, and 3,000 people who had just witnessed something they would never forget. When she sang, Love is a losing game, every single person in that arena sang with her. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was a moment. A shared heartbeat. A collective exhale. One man in the third row, who had been filming the whole thing on his phone, later posted the video online. It went viral within hours. The caption read, "Amy Winehouse stopped her show tonight to help a girl who collapsed. She literally left the stage, climbed into an ambulance, and came back 2 hours later to finish the set. This is what humanity looks like." The following morning, news outlets across the UK ran the story. Amy Winehouse abandons concert to help dying fan. Some praised her as a hero. Others criticized her for leaving thousands of paying customers. Tabloids speculated about her motives, her mental state, whether it was a publicity stunt. But Amy didn't care about the headlines. She only cared about one thing, Sophie. Over the next few weeks, Amy called Emma almost every day. She asked about Sophie's treatment, her pain levels, her spirits. She sent flowers to the hospital with handwritten notes tucked inside. One note read, "You're braver than any song I'll ever write." Another said, "Keep fighting, Sophie. The world needs your light." Sophie's hospital room became a shrine to Amy Winehouse. Posters on the walls. Albums stacked on the bedside table. And in the center of it all, framed carefully, was the setlist from that night at the O2 Arena. Amy had signed it backstage before she left, in her messy handwriting. "Sophie, you reminded me why I sing. Thank you for being brave. Love always, Amy." Sophie recovered enough to go home. Not completely. Leukemia doesn't work that way, but she got stronger. She lived 6 more months. And in those 6 months, she and Amy stayed in touch. They texted about music, about life, about what it means to keep going when everything hurts. Amy sent her playlists, poems, and photos of herself making silly faces just to make Sophie laugh. When Sophie's condition worsened, Emma called Amy. It was late at night. Amy answered on the first ring. "How is she?" Amy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not good," Emma said, crying. "The doctors say it's a matter of days now." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Amy said, "Can I come see her?" Emma didn't expect that. You want to come here?" "If Sophie wants me to." Sophie did. Of course she did. 2 days later, Amy showed up at Sophie's house. No cameras. No entourage. No publicists coordinating the visit. Just Amy, in jeans and a hoodie, carrying a small guitar case. She sat by Sophie's bed for hours. They didn't talk much. Amy just played quiet versions of her songs, humming melodies Sophie had heard 100 times but would never get tired of. At one point, Sophie reached out and touched Amy's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Amy's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for reminding me what this is all for." Before Amy left that day, she did something that would stay with Emma forever. She took off the small gold necklace she always wore, a gift from her grandmother, and placed it gently around Sophie's neck. "This has kept me safe through a lot," Amy said softly. "I want you to have it." Sophie tried to protest, but Amy shook her head. "Please, let me give you something that matters." Sophie touched the necklace, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'll keep it forever." Amy smiled, kissed Sophie's forehead, and whispered, "I know you will." Sophie passed away 3 days later, surrounded by her family. Amy wasn't there when it happened, but Emma called her immediately afterward. Amy didn't speak. She just cried. And then she said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Amy didn't perform for 2 weeks after Sophie died. She locked herself in her apartment, wrote songs she would never release, and grieved for a girl she barely knew but deeply loved. Because that's who Amy was. She felt everything. She carried everyone's pain like it was her own. Years later, after Amy herself was gone, Emma found that box in Sophie's room. Inside was every note Amy had ever sent her. Every lyric. Every flower pressed between pages like sacred relics. And at the bottom of the box was that set list, still framed, still signed, still carrying the weight of a promise kept. And there, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was Amy's necklace. Sophie had been buried with it, but Emma had asked for it back after the funeral. She couldn't let it go. That piece of paper is still in Emma's home today. And every year, on the anniversary of that concert, she posts a photo of it online with the caption, "Amy Winehouse stopped her show to save my sister's life." And in doing so, she reminded us all what it means to be human. The video of that night, grainy, shaky, filmed on someone's phone, has been viewed millions of times. You can see the exact moment Amy drops the mic. You can see her climbing over the barrier. You can see her kneeling beside Sophie, holding her hand like it's the only thing that matters in the world. But here's the part no one expected, the part that changed everything. In the weeks before Amy's own death, she had been working on new music. Music that was different from anything she'd done before. Softer. More introspective. More raw. And in her journals, found after she passed, there were pages and pages of lyrics dedicated to Sophie. Songs about loss. About love. About what it means to touch someone's life even when your own is falling apart. One song, never recorded, never performed, was titled Sophie's Song. The lyrics began, "I held your hand and felt your pain / I sang for you through pouring rain / you taught me more than I could give / you showed me what it means to live." Amy never got to finish it. But those who knew her say that Sophie changed her. That after that night, something shifted. Amy became quieter, more thoughtful. She started talking about legacy differently. Not about albums sold or awards won, but about moments. About the people she touched. About whether she made the world a little less lonely. And in the end, maybe that's what Amy Winehouse's story is really about. Not the tragedy. Not the addiction. Not the tabloid headlines. But the moments when she chose to be human. When she saw someone in pain and decided that nothing else mattered more. Emma still listens to Amy's music every day. She plays it for her own daughter now, telling her the story of the night Amy Winehouse stopped a concert to save her aunt's life. And her daughter asks the same question every time. Did Amy know she was a hero? Emma always gives the same answer. She didn't think she was. But she was. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness still exists. Subscribe so you never miss stories like this. And leave a comment telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected compassion. Because stories like Sophie and Amy's deserve to be told. And kindness deserves to be remembered.